Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Introspection Hour with Brian and Patrick. In today's episode, we're going to talk about when you know it's time to move on after a bad breakup. And the way we're going to talk about it is in three different segments. The first is when you start to enter into a mindset shift. And the second is when you think about all that you've done since the breakup. There's some common scenarios that we all go through. And then the third thing that we want to talk about is when you have this loss of self, loss of your self identity, and what that means. But more importantly, the real reason we're actually talking about this is because Brian wanted to share a story of something that he experienced last week. Brian?
Patrick, the first rule after a breakup is what?
Not accepted and go find another girl or guy.
No, but in all seriousness, the first rule after a serious breakup or divorce is you don't stalk your ex-partner on Facebook or social media. And I honestly did that. I don't have my ex on my Facebook. I don't have her on any social media followings. But unfortunately, last week, I had two people message me out of the blue and ask me, "Hey, buddy, is everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Why wouldn't it be okay? Like, did you hear about what happened to ex-girlfriend?" I'm like, "No." Like, here's the thing. If you're a friend, especially you, Pat, I don't expect you to follow up on my ex-girlfriend. And even if you do, I don't expect you to tell me. I don't expect you to tell me what's going on in her life because obviously it doesn't affect me anymore, right? But what ended up happening last week is that I had these two people come up and tell me, "Your ex is getting engaged." I mean, granted, we have been separated for the last 2 years now, and granted, for the most part, I've moved on. Okay, I've moved on. But for some reason, Pat, hearing her get engaged kind of hit something deep in my heart, primarily because throughout our 10-year relationship, she's always told me that she never wanted to get married. To her, marriage was it was just a piece of paper and it was a waste of time and money. Granted, we lived together, okay? We lived together, we shared finances together, we pretty much lived a married life except for the fact that it wasn't on paper. And hearing people tell me that she's getting engaged after being with this particular person, which I'm going to be assuming less than 1 year, really affected me. And that kind of affected my overall self-worth and my self-belief in myself. And it made me question, like, she is willing to get married to this particular person in less than a year, where we've been together for 10 years and she was not willing to make that same commitment with me. And that really hurt. And so again, Pat, like, for the last couple of days, it's just been really bothering. And I asked myself, like, you know what? Like, why do I even care at this point? She is no longer in my life. Why do I care?
Honestly, yeah, Brian, it's just emotions. They come, and you just got to manage them, right? Like, it doesn't mean anything. All it means is that your mindset is starting to change if it hasn't already. That phrase that you just used, like, why do I even care about this now? Why do I even care about her? That's actually your gut telling you to move on. You're good to go inside. And it's hard because even for me, like, I've had to figure out what that is. And what does that voice really sound like? Because how do you really know? And then it's a risk, right? Like, do you even feel like you've moved on or where are you right now in your mindset?
Yeah, like, for the most part, I have moved on. I have. But it's just that one scenario where it brought up that questioning of my self-worth. Like, we had 10 years together, right? 10 years is a long time for most people to be in a relationship in. And this questioning of my self-worth just made me question, like, am I good enough? And that started transferring to all of the other instances of, like, my self-confidence. I know we talked about self-confidence in our previous videos, but it's different. It makes you question yourself again, you know?
It does. And I think part of it, that hits stronger for you, that might not be the case for others. But everyone has a trigger. Your trigger is actually the fact that she got engaged when she told you for years. And I remember, and I used to think to myself, I'm like, what? This is the craziest definition of marriage that I've ever heard. She didn't want to get married with you. And yet she thought the relationship was good enough where it was at. All that also reaffirms, Brian, is just kind of the fact that it wasn't meant to be. And thank goodness. Right? Like, if you actually stayed together with her and you got quote unquote married, whatever that is, whatever the transaction, I think you just would have been miserable. You certainly wouldn't have been on this introspection journey with us over the last couple of years. So there's always a trigger. and there's an emotion. But when you're able to say that to yourself, dude, why do I even care? Like, great, the other person got another boyfriend or girlfriend, or got engaged or got another car. Is that going to change anything you're going to do? And your answer is usually no. Then that's usually your gut telling you it's good. You're good to go, right? But I mean, let's be honest. The path and the amount of things that we did to get to this point, those go for some funny stories, right? Like right after you break up, probably one of the first things you start to think about is, oh, I'm gonna go through grief. I'm gonna go through some sort of loss, right? Like, Brian, what are the 5 stages of grief? That people usually start off with.
The most common emotion that most people are going to go through, and this is actually a pretty common thing that a lot of people will go through, is that 5 stages of grief by Kubler-Ross. And it's this idea of everyone's going to go through denial, everyone's going to bargain, you're going to experience anger, depression, and at some point, which is what we're talking about today, this idea of acceptance, right? The acceptance of this mindset shift of the fact that you're ready to move on. We've all experienced all of this. And I remember the thing that I want to do the most after getting out of a serious relationship is jumping right back into another relationship, right? And that's what I did. The first instance I was single again, I immediately downloaded like Tinder, Coffee Meets Bagel, Match.com, like all of these different apps just to fill that void, right? We don't want to feel lonely. It's also, not only is it validating our self-worth, but it's kind of giving us this sense that we belong to somebody else, or at least that feeling like we need somebody else, right? We all been there. You've been there. I've been there many times. And we've all gone through the dating phases, dating stages, and at some point you come to realize like this is not good for me.
You're right, Brian. That void, it's pretty strong. It's pretty big inside of our heart. And it's not just our hearts, because your whole life you had someone there. And so there's a time void, there's a physical void, there's a emotional void, there's a thought void, right? Like you try not to think about that person, and most of the time you're not, but that person comes back. And so all those voids, you just try to fill that with something, anything, work, dating, clubs, one night stands, whatever it is, basketball, right? Whatever it is to fill the voids, man, it was hard.
I 100% agree with you with all of this emotional breakdown where you think you're ready to start dating again, but you're in fact not, right? We're trying to substitute one emotion for another. In this case, we're trying to go again, fill that sense of loneliness and feeling, at least for me, feeling that sense of self-worth, trying to rebuild my confidence up to tell me that, hey, I do deserve to be loved, and I am worthy of love. And at some point after like the 50th date with 50 different women, I just told myself, you know what, this is not working. And we always hear the stories of like you have to work on yourself before you are ready to start loving other people, because if you can't love yourself, how could you expect to love another person? And I feel like that is 100% correct with anyone who is dealing with this recent divorce or this recent breakup, is that you have to learn to really accept yourself. And going back to what you're saying, being authentic and just knowing when it is that you're ready, right? You're talking about this gut check, this mindset shit. You have to just 100% know when it's time to jump into that boat again.
And I think the other thing that really changes for people is when you've had a significant relationship and you break from that, usually you're on some sort of path of love, and love requires you to kind of give love to the other person, right? Love the other person. The thing is, Brian, after you get out of that, you're still trying to give your love to someone else. And I think that's why you and me and probably the millions and millions of people out there who have gone through this or are going through it right now, you try to jump back into another relationship because of that. Because you're so used to, you're conditioned to give love to another person. And that has a negative consequence to us overall. Besides the fact that you get rejected, besides the fact that, a lot of dates don't work out, but more importantly, it starts to affect you emotionally inside and start to break down your self-confidence. Because everything that you've been doing that you gauge yourself is not for you, right? So I kind of went through this too, where I was like, man, none of these girls, I don't get a second date. This is like a bad job interview series where you get invited, you go through the first interview, you don't get any callbacks, or the girl doesn't, girl's not interested. Brian, I gotta tell you, that's when my confidence started to break down. What I saw myself as. Do I even know what type of girl I want? Do I even know what type of man I am? Right. And so you just start to kind of question everything about yourself. And you're like, is that me? Or am I good enough? Am I really, a good guy? Am I a good catch? People used to tell me that all the time. And I'm like, are you serious? Then how come I can't get past like a second date? And so the other interesting thing is, I think however long you're doing that, or however long you're in this phase, you end up not really having an actual honest conversation. And so that was kind of where I was at. Well, besides the 50 dates, Brian, like where else were your emotions going through this phase?
Exactly what you were going through. All of these dates that I went through was kind of in a way to fulfill that. Like I went on this date with the one chick. It's funny. I used to be proud of telling you, I have like 3 dates this week, one day for each girl. And we tell ourselves that, right? Because back when we were younger, this is before obviously social media and all that, like going on dates meant like you were kind of popular. So in a way, it was kind of inflating my ego. Like I have 3 dates, guys, I'm good. But in reality, it was like I'm doing it for the sake of just because I have nothing else better to do. And it wasn't like I was really trying to search for a girl either. It was, again, like you said, it's trying to conflate my ego, kind of inflate my confidence, to just have someone there to fill that loneliness. Because let's face it, I was lonely. You were lonely when you went on your dates. I was lonely when I went on my dates. It's just you were trying to fill that void. And at some point, you realize this is stupid. Like, what am I doing? Right? What am I doing with my life? Like, why am I dating these women when I'm in fact not really even into these women?
That, I think, is also a byproduct of how we start to judge whether or not we're being better than our ex, right? Because the other thing that I went through, and you mentioned, you kind of disconnected, and I disconnected, but there's always a way to try to find what your ex is up to. What are they doing? Maybe some mutual friends, or, you stalk them on social media anonymously. Whatever the case may be, there's this inclination for us to give in to our internal jealousy. Everyone has jealous emotions, and you sort of give into it, and you're like, I better be in a better position than my ex, right? Like if I'm breaking down in tears, or my self-confidence is bad, my ex better be worse. That's just because I value me above my ex. Just that's how it is. To me, Brian, that was a weird phase, and I couldn't get over that for some reason, or it took a long time, and it was a weird phase to be in, where on the outside you say I don't really care, and on the inside you're like, I hope I'm just even an inch better than the other person. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, Brian?
These last 2 years have been me trying to one up my ex. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, dude, because like there's these reasons why I want to be, quote, again, successful. Like, why do I want to be successful? Why do I want to make more money? It's in essence to prove to her that she was wrong. Like, you made a mistake in choosing another guy, and this is what you're missing out on. And this is exactly what you're saying. This whole comparison thing. It's like all of these things that we're doing, this podcasting, my video skills, my personal development to some degree, was in essence to prove to her that she had made a mistake and that she chose wrong. But in actual reality, I guarantee you, this goes for everybody. They don't care what you're going through because they're living their own life. They're happy, they're engaged, they have a new boyfriend, they have a new girlfriend. They do not care what you're going through. And that's the one thing you have to realize. Again, going back to our main topic of a mindset shift, is that we have to just realize and say, why do I even care about this? Because for a fact, they don't.
And it's weird because if you go down that rabbit hole even more, the other thing that you start to do is you lose your sense of your identity, who you are. And that's like one of the deepest holes you get into after a really bad breakup. And it's something that I didn't really experience, but Brian, you did. So So I'm gonna put you on the spot again, bro. But share what it means when you start to lose your self identity, and how deep does that go?
In every relationship that I've been in, I've been in three serious relationships, each lasting basically 3 years, and this last one was 10 years. Every separation always had me questioning, who am I? What did I used to like to do for fun? Right? What were my hobbies? What were my interests before I met you? And I think this is important for a lot of people to understand and grasp. And going back to this recent separation, 10 years is a long time. You had 10 years to forge an identity with my ex-girlfriend. We have done a lot of things together. We had a house together. We had activities. We had we were married for the most part without the paper, okay? And to all of a sudden take that away, where I'm living in like a nice 4-bedroom house to living in a small apartment. I'm the cliche like loser boyfriend. Let's just put it that way. Granted, I have a nice apartment, but still. I am that cliche, right? We are so used to this life that we were accustomed to living with either our wives, our boyfriend, husbands, to all of a sudden being separated and living a life on our own where our identity was tied to that relationship or to that marriage, right? Where we had this routine of coming home, spending time with our loved ones, doing activities together, to all of a sudden losing that. Right, weekends were always with the ex or with friends, obviously, but most of the time we were spending time with our exes, doing activities together. To all of a sudden, doing things for yourself, and I feel like that's hard for a lot of people to grasp. And you start losing this sense of identity of like, who am I? What am I meant to do? What do I enjoy doing again? What are my hobbies? What are my interests? Because I guarantee you, Pat, that's where a lot of people start questioning themselves. Because I know I did, Googling how to find yourself again. If you Google that right now, that's like, it's such a popular trend. How to find yourself again,
The other thing that I can relate to on this one is actually, I started to ask myself, if I'm ever going to find love, is true love exists, as cliche as romance novel as that sounds. I did go through a phase where I was starting to ask, does that really exist? Can I even find someone in my immediate geographic area? Do I need to go and search the entire world for my one true love? Luckily she was in Southern California, so I was able to meet her. But you start questioning even love in and of itself, right? So it's one thing to start questioning your own self-identity. It's another to start to question whether love is worth it, whether love is real, whether true love is real. And when I got to that point, Brian, it started making me actually be a little bit more selfish. I'm like, maybe I don't need to find love. I'll just be single the rest of my life. Or I'm Catholic, so every time something major happens, I always ask myself, does this mean, is this a moment where I consider the priesthood, right? So a quick backstory is, as I was growing up, everyone thought I was going to be a priest for a lot of different reasons. And I love church and all that, but I was like, no, I love women too. And so I wanted kids, I wanted to get married and all that. And that's usually what brought me back to reality. But I always started to question when I started thinking about, am I going to find love? Is it better to just sacrifice and be single, right? In my case, and go be a priest or something like that. You kind of have this backup plan. Hopefully, at least I had this like backup plan. To go be a priest. If nothing worked out in my life, I'm gonna go be a priest. That's my backup plan. And the thing is, when you lose love, and when you start questioning what is the definition of love to you, what it means to you, that's part of that rabbit hole. And I don't have a magic recipe of what got me out. I just kind of woke up one day, I'm like, why am I even thinking about this? Why am I letting it bother me? And I think that's why we started our episode so much on this mindset shift. The other question I wanted to ask is, how much of that did you start to question whether or not you're a good person?
Dude, I had that event today, man. I mean, today was just one of those days where I was just questioning myself again. I was just having this like mini identity crisis. I mean, it's just COVID pandemic. It's affecting me. It affects a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, like you said earlier in this episode, all your friends tell you you're a good catch, you're a good person, and yet all of these people that you're going on dates with are not attracted to you. And you start to question yourself, like, well, if my friends are telling me that I'm a good person, but the fact that this person who I'm just dating, which I like, and they don't like me back, it makes you ask yourself, are my friends just lying to me because they're, friends say nice things, right? And then I started realizing at some point throughout my, hero's journey is that I need to learn to start accepting myself more. I have to stop relying on this other person to dictate how I'm going to be feeling, right? Whether I'm happy, whether I'm sad or angry. Because in our previous episode on confidence, where I talked about Stoic philosophy, it's this idea that, we are in charge of our own emotion. We are in charge of our own attitudes and not the external things that are surrounding us.
You do start to question, and it's one of the darkest holes that you can throw yourself into after a bad breakup is whether or not you're a good person. And then you get to a point you're like, F it, that's it. I'm just gonna let loose. I'm gonna go sleep around. I'm gonna go, whatever, drink every night, party hardy, right? And some people go through that phase too. Majority of us usually stop ourselves for a lot of different reasons. And I found myself stopping from doing that, giving in, right? The temptation is so strong, I would say, in terms of just letting go of all the rules and being someone that you're not, but who you think you want to be, right? Like the little devil inside of you, as people say. When you get to that point and you're in this echo chamber, which we mentioned in previous episodes, you got to start asking yourself, why are you even bothered by it? Are you really bothered by it or not? Is it just something leading you astray? Because if you are hearing your voice say that, it's your gut telling you you're ready to move on. And so, Brian, like even talking through all this and thinking about it from last week, are you over your ex, or have you finally gotten to acceptance?
Yeah, I have. And I know last week was just one of those conundrums where I just wasn't getting a lot of sleep. The holidays were coming, and it affected me. I'm not gonna lie, it affected me. But now, looking back at it now, like you said, why should I care? She's no longer a part of my life. So in essence, yeah, I'm over it. I'm actually just I'm still going back to this identity crisis that we'll talk about in the next episode. Just trying to figure out still what it is that I want in my life. And that's something that, we'll save for another episode.
Yeah, and so for insights like that and to figure out how to get over bad breakups, amongst other things in your life, and make sure you tune in and subscribe to the Introspection Hour with Brian and Patrick.
Happy holidays, everybody. Happy New Year's.